Okay, so we are up to chapter 23, verse 18, Parshas Ki Tetzei. Lo siya kadesha mi benos Yisrael, lo ya kadesh mi bnei Yisrael. So there's not allowed to be a kadesha. What's a kadesha? Rashi says mufkeres, mikudeshes and muzumenes lisnos. You can't have a woman who is a kadesha, who is, Rashi says, set aside or abandoned, set aside and prepared for znus, meaning to say as a harlot. So Rashi is telling us that the word kadosh means something set aside. So kadesha, which is a very strange word to be used, means a prostitute. Now, also, why do we need Veloya Kadesh? This is a man, Mizuman Mishkav Zachor, set aside designated for homosexual relations. Why do we need a specific verse against being a prostitute or being a homosexual prostitute? When first of all, you're not allowed to just have relations anyway outside of marriage. So why do we need specific verses about this? And also, what's the definition of a prostitute? It doesn't really say it here, but okay.
So Steinwall says some commentators explain that these terms are referring to professional prostitution, as opposed to the words sota and zona, which typically refer to casual licentiousness.
Yeah, presumably that's for sure. But how would you violate the condition of being a professional prostitute? You got your card, your union card. I mean, the uncle's tier game, lo sehei is Islam Nas Yisrael bar Evan. So uncle's therefore makes a different explanation. A woman from the daughters of Israel shall not be married to a slave. Because this is also a woman's abandoned to promiscuity, because there's no marriage by the slaves. Meaning, if a slave marries an Israelite woman, it doesn't take effect. Shaharei hukshu chamor. The slaves are compared to donkeys. It says shvuchem pom chamor, amadom chamor, a nation comparable to donkeys. And a Jewish man cannot marry a Canaanite woman, a slave woman, as his wife. He will become promiscuous through her. Because all her relations are as nus. There's no marriage there. They wanted to have an idea that let's say your mom's there, they wanted to come up with the concept that a mamzer can marry a non-Jewish woman who he makes her his Canaanite slave and thereby frees, and he's not prohibited to marry a Canaanite slave. So they suggested this as a way of getting around the problem of a mamzer. And they suggested it to Rabbi Soloveitchik. And he said, Lincoln freed the slaves. No such thing anymore. Not a good solution, according to Rabbi Soloveitchik. Lo savi esnan zona mechir kelev veis Hashem okecha kol neder. Ki sovas Hashem okecha gam shneim. I also always found this verse to be random. You're not allowed to bring an esnan zona. The esnan zona is if you paid a harlot, let's say $100, and now she wants to take that fee and buy a sheep and bring it as a sacrifice. That doesn't work. Or let's say, well, actually, no, that would work. But Rashi explains, Nasan Latella, if he gave the harlot directly a sheep, if she laundered it, it would be okay. But if he gave her directly a sheep, that's not for a fee, that cannot be brought as a sacrifice. Umachir kelev, or if you sold a dog for a sheep, you can't bring that to Hashem for kol neder, for any vow. Because this is a abomination of God. Rabos shinu yam, to include their transformations. That's what Rashi says. So, for example, could go and chitim ba'ason soles. Let's say the harlot took wheat as her fee, and he made flour out of it. It's still forbidden to be used as a grain offering. So these seem so random connected, but maybe Dan, with his extensive reading, I thought you would speculate that this is really probably coming in light of some ancestral idolatrous practices where maybe they used to pay the harlots directly with a lamb, and then she brought it, or that was part of the worship service. And a dog maybe also was like, it seems so random. Why pick out a dog? Why pick out a dog? What's the
Yehuda said that he'll send a young lamb.
what?
Yehuda said that he'll send a lamb, but in the meantime, he gave her a collateral.
So that might have been the going rate. Is all you're saying. That was the typical price.
But the way I teach these two verses is that because Hashem doesn't write extra words in the Torah, so this mitzvah is for every Jew that they should earn their money in a kosher way and spend it in a kosher way.
Okay, I mean, I agree with the spirit of what you're saying, but it's not what it says. It's very specific provision, hyper specific, and it makes you wonder, like we're missing some context here, some historical context. That's why I was referring to Dan. He always enlightens us with so many views.
Certainly we know that the like Baal, part of this worship of Baal was prostitution.
Yeah, so the prostitution one I can understand. It makes more sense. But the dog seems so random. You wouldn't think that they would say a pig.
He says the price of a dog, and I think that he's right. It's the going rate of what it would be to determine like substantive value of what it would have been to have a sacrifice in the same cost range.
No, but that's exactly what it does. It mean exchanged a lamb for a dog. And the Gemara says the verse, and here's the footnote, the verse does not mean that money received as a dog may not be used for purchase and offering. It means specifically if you exchange a dog for a lamb.
I think dogs were more common than pigs.
I don't know. I think dogs are really not common. You almost never have a reference to a dog.
I know, but in the archaeological record,
Oh,
you see
yeah.
almost nothing with pigs.
Yeah.
But among Canaanites, you do see some dog laws.
Okay, fine. But what about a donkey?
I understand
Yeah.
that it's the lamb that was involved, anything that sort of led to the involvement of it being connected to the original sin of the prostitution. They don't want it involved. That's really what
I
it
understand
is.
the prostitute. Fine. So what you're suggesting is that the dog, the price of a dog was really what was typically given to the prostitute? A
I
dog?
guess that's exactly right. I
That's
think it's the
interesting.
going rate of whatever it may have been for a dog to, I guess, of a dog, to own a dog, to have a dog. It could have been the same thing, and that's why I think it's a connect, but it's
Okay.
interesting verse either way.
Yeah, Rabbi Steindl doesn't say anything about the dog?
No, but the only other time we talked about the dog was in the Makot, in the
Yeah.
plagues, when they, is this the
No,
only
that's-
other place
No. We talk about it with the plagues, that they did not wag they did not bark their bark, but we also talk about it that when you have a carcass, don't eat it, send it to the dog.
Right, that's the other side. So this is the third and final time we hear about the dogs?
Every time I say this is the only time, there's a second time, there's a third time, I always get it wrong.
Okay.
So I'm not gonna comment,
Rabbi,
but
I just looked at the note here on Sefaria in the English. I don't know if you can see. It says the pay of a dog is, i.e., a male prostitute.
Yeah.
I never saw that before.
okay, interesting. Okay. All right, so now we go on to the next verse. Lo tashich la'achicha neshech kesef neshech ocham. Do not charge interest to your brother. Neshech kesef neshech ocham. Interest of money or interest of food. Neshech kol davar asher yishach. Do not charge interest for anything. Rashi says, Azhara levove shelo yitin ribas l'malva. This is a prohibition against the borrower that you cannot pay interest to the lender. V'achar kach, and then afterwards, azharacha lemalva es kaspecha lo titain v'neshech. First, it is a commandment against the borrower, and then afterwards it'll be a commandment against the lender. Now here also, this is also problematic to me because what's inflation now? I don't know, 6% or something, right? So you're lending money to somebody, you should be at least allowed to charge inflation. Or at least the interest you can get in a CD in a bank.
I don't think they were that sophisticated. They didn't have a monetary system. I mean, I don't think I don't think inflation was an issue.
I know, but I'm saying today.
Well, today we have the principal. We don't need to worry about it.
No, principal doesn't work for interest. Yeah, we use usually a heter iska for loans. Principal is for the sabbatical year, but the heter iska.
If I would have loaned him money, we'd have to make a heter iska.
Okay, that's true.
But heter iska has risk involved, so it's almost like you're your business partner. But anyway,
Like everybody understands what it is.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. The Nachri Tashich, to the non-Jew, you are allowed to lend with interest. And some say Nachri Tashich means it's a mitzvah to lend the non-Jew with interest. But to your brother you cannot lend at interest. So God blesses you with all that you use your hand. Then you narrate. Rashi says, "Nachri tashich, to the non-Jew you take interest, not to your brother." Lava b'mikol aseh aseh means to say that this is a prohibition which comes from a positive commandment, means therefore it has the force of a positive commandment. Lavoro of the shnei lavim v'aseh. So you're in violation of 2 negative commandments and 1 positive, meaning to say, if you pay interest to a Jew, you're transgressing. Do not cause your brother to take interest. And also, you make when we say you may cause a non-Jew to take interest, the implication is, but not a Jew. And so therefore, by paying him, that you're in violation of that. I would have also thought that there would be a prohibition against lending with interest, but there's also a prohibition on paying the interest. Also, Muslims are not allowed to charge interest. Christians are allowed to, I think.
Not to one another.
They can't?
That's why Jews became the money lenders.
Right. In the Middle Ages,
In the
right.
Middle
Jews
Ages,
were the
Jews
money
became the
lenders.
I had an interesting thing with a client where the family was giving them money, but they didn't want it to be a gift. They wanted it to be a loan. They wanted to do interest free because they didn't want to charge but the laws require you to actually, for it to be a loan and not a gift,
Yeah.
they had to charge interest. So I wonder how that works with respect to halacha.
Right, because or else it's considered a gift and they have to pay the
So
taxes.
they had to have like a 4% or something minimum interest on the loan.
That's an
So,
IRS part.
right, so I guess it supersedes, because it's an IRS
Do you have to
requirement.
collect it?
Yes, you do, and then, so do you have to give it back? Like, is that like what the halacha should be, or do you have to just let it be and charge it and do it? I don't know the answer, it's interesting.
If you don't collect it, when your estate is, if your estate is audited, I'll count it as a gift and say you didn't pay the gift.
Right.
You know, say you
That's
didn't pay
really
the gift.
essentially what it is if you're not paying the interest.
I mean, I'm not getting those types of gifts anyway.
I'm just saying it's an
wondering.
interesting thing to kick around just because we're.
Yeah. Okay, next one. Kisidor neder Hashem al kechach. Oh, this is a good one. When you make a vow to Hashem, lo ta'acher Hashemo, do not delay payment. Ki ja'aroshi droshenu Hashem al kechem imach v'yavach hachet. When you make a vow to Hashem, don't delay it, because God will seek it out for you, from you, and you'll have a sin. Rashi says, Lo ta'acher Hashemo. So there's a lot of different opinions here in the Gemara and Rosh Hashanah and Beitza. What does it mean? But it means shalosh regalim. The rabbi, I guess Rashi's position position is you have 3 festivals. Some opinion there is that you have 1, some you have 2, some you have 3, some you have 4. So now Rashi says it means you have 3 festivals.
Well, that's why we only have to do Kol Nidre every year, right?
Well, I guess Kol Nidre. Yeah, maybe that's how the practice came to do it only once a year. Nice. Okay. If you cease to vow, there is not going to be a sin. That's also an interesting verse. Why does it say you will not have a sin if you cease to vow? Meaning to say, nobody's making you vow. The lips, the words that come out of your lips, you have to guard and do like you vowed to Hashem, a voluntary offering that you spoke with your mouth. Rashi says, so it's a positive commandment on top of a negative commandment. You know how to violate the vow? You have to keep the vow. And we know that the verse, there's a different verse from the Proverbs. Better off not to vow than to vow not to pay. Do you see any connections here between these different verses? Kitabo b'kerem reyacha, when you come into the vineyard of your friend, v'achalta anavim, and you eat grapes, like your soul desires, don't, you can eat as much as you want, but don't put it in your vessel. So if you're working in the grapes of wrath, you can eat the grapes, but you can't take them home with you. The verse is speaking of a worker. It can't be that basically anybody could come into their friend's vineyard and eat it. It means the worker is working. Rashi says, you can eat what you need, but you can't overeat. Torah is talking about the time of the harvest. When you're putting into the vessel of the owner, if he's digging and hoeing, then he can't eat it. The next verse. When you come into the standing grain of your fellow, and you pluck the ears with your hands, you may not lift the sickle. So, okay, here's another rule. Like when you come into your friend's field, you can eat then you're allowed to eat from the field with your hands, but you can't harvest it with a sickle. This is speaking about a worker, Rashi says.
Must be a big problem if the Torah was making a whole point about letting you know that protecting people, essentially they were going to eat it anyway. So maybe this is a way of just saying, hey, if I'm working in the fields, it's probably going to happen.
It could be that, or it could be the other way, that the Torah wants to make sure that the workers who are out there in the fields are allowed to eat. The Torah wants to take care of the workers.
Okay, so that's certainly an angle that I accept. It just seems like it goes pretty far
it's emphasizing
to make what's clear about what they can take and what they can't.
Yeah. It seems hyper specific again. Right? Like, why do they have to legislate everything? There's 74 commandments here. Kikach ish isha voa. We just had this verse. We just did a whole tractate on it, 89 pages, and now we're doing it again in Kiddushin. When a man takes a woman to be his wife, that was one of the sources that you could betroth her through cohabitation. She doesn't find favor in his eyes because he found in her some nakedness, something wrong, because of us, say for krisus, and then he writes for her a bill of divorce. And then he puts it in her hand and he sends her away. Rashi says, mitzvah l'avogarsha. That comes from the last page of Gittin. If he doesn't like her anymore, he's obligated to divorce her. The Talmud says, once you decide you don't like her, she's not allowed to serve you. You can't be married to her. Meaning to say, well, also the Talmud in the last page of Gittin, 98, talks about a three-way dispute about what's the grounds for divorce. Is it if she has, you find that she was sexually immoral, or else she burns the soup, or even if you find somebody nicer than her. Those are the three positions of the Talmud. So she leaves his house and she goes and is with another man, and she marries somebody else. So this is the law that the Talmud discusses, that just like the divorce can be done through a contract, so too the marriage can be done through a contract. Rashi says, and this is also the last page of Gittin, this guy is not like the first guy, because so he kicked out this woman from her house because she was sinful, and this one brings her in. And the latter man despises her because of her sefer krisus. He writes her a divorce, and he puts it in her hand and he sends her out. Or if he dies, Rashi says, again quoting the last page of Gittin, if you marry a woman who was promiscuous to the first husband, then the Torah is promising you're going to end up hating him. If he doesn't hate her and he wants to keep her as his wife, she's going to bury him. It says Oki Amus. Then lo yuchal bala rishon asher shachal asher l'tachta liot lo isha acharei asher ki to'avai lifnei Hashem lo tachti ha'aretz asher Hashem l'kachem nasein chanachala. Then the verse tells us, then the first husband can't remarry her. The first husband who sent her away can no longer take her back as a wife after she became married to somebody else, because it's an abomination before God, and that will make the land a sin, and Hashem gave it to us as an inheritance. This is the law of what's called machzir grushaso, that if a man wants to remarry his wife after she marries somebody else, if a man is married to a woman and he divorces her and she's with another man, he then can't remarry her anymore. But the reverse is not true. If a man is married to a woman and they divorce and he marries another woman in between, he's allowed to remarry
Her.
He's allowed to remarry the first wife.
Well, that's because is that true even today?
Even today.
Even today. Because back then they had multiple, one man could have multiple wives, so it made sense.
Right. So it's true even today. Yeah. But one time when my father was reading in the case about this in the newspaper, and so the man did that, and he said, "Oh, it's okay for him, but not for her." When you have the Talmud, every incident in the world is a reference point to the Talmud. That after she has been defiled, this includes a sota who was secluded, and so Rashi's telling us that when she's secluded, she can't go back to her first husband. If she was secluded with another man, and he warned her, unless he gives her the bitter waters to drink, she can't go back. Okay, next verse. When a man marries a new wife, can't go into the battle. Not for any matter. He has to be clean to his home for 1 year. His obligation to gladden the heart of his wife. Rashi says, I skipped the Rashis. Isha chadasha, she chadasha, new to him. I feel even a widow. But this excludes problem machzir grushaso. But if he remarries his wife we divorced, who's allowed to because she didn't marry somebody else, then it doesn't count. Lo yavor devar tzavah. He can't go any service for the army. Called devar. He's exempt, even on the home front. Even on the home front. But the people who go back from battle, al pi Kohen, by the words of the Kohen, like Bano lo bayis lo chanacho, he built a new house and he didn't dedicate it, or eres isha lo kacha, or betrothed the woman, must speak in my mozum and takim drachim. Those people have to prepare the home front. They work on the home front. Yela beiso, he shall be free for his house. Af b'shvil beiso. Also, if he built his house, bim bana bayis chanacho v'natakaram cho eno zazmi beiso b'shvil tzarchem nocha. Then, in those circumstances, he doesn't leave his house to take care of because he has to take care of his house. He doesn't go to war. Visimach, he has to gladden his wife. The verse says, Yisamach, he should gladden his wife. Targmo v'yachta yat isisa. He must gladden his wife. Amatargim v'yachta im itita. he renders it, he shall be glad with his wife. That's a mistake. He shall gladden his wife. So we see from here, it's a mitzvah from the Torah that on the first year of marriage, you're supposed to be gladdening one's wife. It's a special mitzvah to gladden one's wife, a biblical commandment to gladden one's wife. Okay, we'll stop
Told me
here.
once that it's just a suggestion for the first year. The rest of the time, you're already used to it. So
All right, the first year is a suggestion, and then after that, you're not required.
no,
that's
you're not required, but
That's
you're
not
already.
what it means.
No,
You're
no, no.
always
I'm
a
saying that you're already so used to it.
Oh, there you go.
365 days of
Baruch
it.
Hashem. Baruch Hashem.